Welcome to Herself Reclaimed. I'm Jennifer Soames, an integrative and capacity coach, helping women regain energy and capacity so they can make effective decisions, set stronger boundaries, and have sustainable success in both life and in business. Today I'm joined by Linda Eskay. Let me share a bit about her and then we're going to get into our conversation. Linda is a coach, speaker, author, and advocate who helps high-achieving women strengthen family connection and reduce household stress while building meaningful businesses. After being laid off at the age of 50 and navigating a profound personal reset, she devoted her work to supporting parents in breaking survival mode cycles and creating emotionally safe, connected homes. Linda brings a grounded mix of stress education, nervous system awareness, and compassionate coaching to empower parents so they can move from confusion and chaos to clarity and calm. Her work is practical, compassionate, and deeply human, helping women trust themselves and lead with their families and businesses with greater ease. She loves to share that she is a mom who turned pain into purpose and wants other parents to know that there is hope for restoring harmony at home. Let me bring in and welcome Linda. Welcome, Linda. It is so wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so happy that we connected a
I
month ago,
know.
I think it was, right?
Yeah, it's been a little bit, and I'm so excited for us to actually have a recorded conversation because our first one was so profound. So, as you know, preventing burnout is the focus of my work with women entrepreneurs. And many of our viewers want to avoid sliding down that slippery slope themselves. Having spent many years with a hyperactive and controlling limbic system, which is the part of your brain responsible for your fight, flight, and freeze response, I know what it's like to not feel safe in my mind and my body. Now, having healed that by rewiring my brain, I fully understand how important feeling safe is to not just our emotional and mental health, but also to our physiological health. When you talk about safety as the foundation of your work, what do you actually mean? And not just as a concept, but as something a woman can feel in her body and create in her home.
And I'm so glad that you shared that part of your story and being able to move from, state A to state B or state M, right? As long as that
Right.
takes. Because when I was a risk analyst, I was completely dysregulated. And when you're talking about safety, I didn't understand what that meant back then. And it really does come down to the simple threat response that we all naturally have. So if we're living a life or running a business that doesn't align with our true nature and our gifts and our propensities or talents, we're going to experience what we now call, burnout. But I could say it was burnout, but it was my brain completely seizing because I was trying to do work that didn't align with who I am. And no amount of medication was helping. And my doctor was fearful that I was going to have a heart attack. So I know there are women who are going to listen to this and watch this and know exactly what that feels like. And I believe that it was part of my journey so that I could really relate and understand what that does feel like. And when I was laid off 8 years ago, this past month actually, everything changed. I haven't been on medication since. My brain and my body able to relax. I was able to be creative and logical and really, really tune into my own intuition and trust my path going forward, knowing that I couldn't go back to that existence. So for the purposes of this conversation and understanding what that feels like, I really think that it's women who are living in old patterns and conditioned cycles of believing that our worth is tied to our productivity, and when we talk about running a business, it's like, are we chasing the business? Or are we just showing up, shining our light as brightly as we can, and inviting people to come sit beside us and hear our story? And there's a completely different energy with that, right? So if your clients and your listeners are in that churn of buying into other people's belief systems about what success looks like very, very easily can turn into that escalated burnout and fight or flight, right?
Yeah, such good points. The first one I want to also just echo is when we create that safety and like that trust within ourselves, like everything changes. I also came off of how many medications? A couple medications when I rewired my brain and went drastically down in the dosing of another. And these were all ones that I've been on for like average of 10 years.
Mm.
And, grateful for them. But yeah, as things changed and my body felt safe and my brain no longer sent those messages to my body to say that there was some kind of danger, even if it was, not necessarily like real danger, right? But perceived. When all that just calmed down, it's like, oh, then yeah, I don't need those things anymore. And just like you mentioned, like creativity opened up, and yeah, it's a very different space to be in. And I think a lot of people don't know that that is possible to begin with, and even what that feels like. So I love this message that, ladies listening, like there is another way. And we're both testaments to that, both Linda and I.
Mhm.
Like we can tell you that change can happen, and it can even have that physiological effect of coming off of medications. So it's pretty profound. Now, we're not medical doctors, so, obviously, like,
Right.
there's like the little caveat with that, but we're just talking from our own experience of what we've, what has been our reality.
But if
And
I may, I would like to add
yeah,
that I think it's such a beautiful point of, what is happening neurologically and physiologically in our brain and in our body, our nervous system, our whole self when we're not aligned with who we really are, right? And the answer so often is medication to calm the symptoms, because we cannot function in that state and the symptoms are so bad, right? So we are looking for that relief. I know I was, and I was grateful to have the pills. I was on two medications, but they didn't do anything. And my doctor just kept increasing the dose, and it was like I got to the point where I just wasn't me. And I decided I didn't want that anymore. But what's the alternative, So I think it's such a great message that we do have the ability to change. And I know that this is going to transfer, we're going to move this conversation into parenting, and that's exactly what I want parents to understand. Like the same thing that you're teaching them about burnout, I'm helping them see that that's what's happening in their children. They're experiencing the same neurological and physiological responses that we do when we are misaligned.
absolutely. And that alignment is such an important piece, I know, for both of our work. And it's just one of my really key values. Like one of my most important values is that alignment, and it always has been, even in my first business as a body worker. And when we're not aligned in many ways, whether it's with our business, whether it's with how we show up in the world, with the beliefs that we think about ourselves and with others, like something else goes amiss. And that can show up in so many ways. It can certainly show up as stress, as physiological challenges, symptoms that you think are completely unrelated can still be related to that. And like you said, there's like more to the story, and it's like peeling back the layers and exploring that deeper. And there's, going back to medication, like there's a time and a place for it, and thank goodness for medication when we need it, absolutely. And yet there can be some deeper dives that can peel back those layers of looking at, are we aligned with what we want for our lives, who we are. I know you're a big fan of human design, as I'm becoming as well. So our conversation might go there a little bit today as well. But yeah, this alignment is so important. And I do really, really stress to my clients about aligning with your vision and your values. And if you've watched and listened to my previous conversations, ladies listening, you'll have heard me talk about that numerous times. But it is true that when we get away from that, then, things start to spiral outward. And this affects our children. This affects our homes. And now I have to admit, I am not a parent of two-legged children. I have four-legged interspecies children. And at the same time, I know that ladies, you watching and listening, a lot of you are parents. So this is where Linda shines and really can help you out. Because when you have your own body, mind, and yourself aligned and regulated, that's going to be an example for your kids. And I know she's going to talk more about that.
Yeah, and like all of this ties together as a holistic woman. I have a business, I have kids, I have a husband, I have a house to run, I have groceries to buy. Like we have all the things, to do. But we're carrying the weight of so many other things. We feel like we're responsible for everyone, even though we might not recognize that. We feel again like our worth is tied to our productivity. So there are a lot of women who have a really hard time relaxing, being still and quiet because there's that constant, what are you doing? You have so much to do. You don't have time to sit here and, take a bath or get a pedicure. You have to be doing X, Y, Z. And it's in this space that you achieve of that safety and calm that you can trust your gut and your heart and follow your intuition. But when we're in that constant state of fight or flight, there's none of that is happening, right? All the blood is going to the extremities to run away, and our brain is just thinking about how can I get away. And just to circle back, like we know there's not a tiger chasing us, but our brain doesn't know that. So when we are living contrary to who we are, contrary to our design, we are actually activating a threat response in our brain that says it's not safe to be me.
Mm-hmm.
So who do I have to be to belong? To belong in the family, to belong in society, right? And so there's a lot of that. So you have soul-led, heart-filled, heart-led women who are doing work that they love. The problem is they're probably doing it from a place of an energy that doesn't align with who they are, right? So that in itself, it's like, oh, I love my business. I can go back a couple years when I got into a place of listening to other people say, you need the funnels, you need the this, you need the lead magnets, you need all the things. It's not my jam, any of it, none of it, right? And I started thinking, when was I most successful and clients were just showing up and it was just beautiful, And I was like, because I wasn't doing any of those things that everybody told me that I had to do to be successful. So I stopped. And things just got, my intuition got greater and it was restored, I guess I should say, right? And I was able to follow the next lily pad and then stay curious about what was next. And the things that you need to grow your business and yourself will show up if you can get to that state. So when it comes to parenting, and when we're talking about high achieving women, women who are running a business or in the corporate world, everything that's going on at home and with their relationships with their partners and their children is seeping in to their business life, right? It's always in the background. There's sadness, there's regret, there's guilt, there's shame, there's all those things, And I know for me, I can just speak from my own personal experience. I was fearful for my kids because I wasn't getting the thing right that I wanted to get right the most. I was failing at the thing I wanted to get right the most. And it was scary because I didn't know what to do for my kids, namely my daughter, because my daughter and I had a tough time there when she was in high school. Both of us are very heavily triggered. What I discovered was, when just touch on human design shows you your blueprint, who you are, how you process information, so how you navigate the world, how you learn, what your energy type is like all these things. So when we apply it to children, we can see how some of them are really falling out of the system very quickly, right? Because they're not designed, a lot of them are not designed to sit in a desk for 7 hours a day. Our brains are actually not designed to go from one topic to the next concept to the blah, 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 right? Without rest and integration. So kind of all the things that we're doing for kids in the home environment and then in school is really counterproductive to supporting their natural flow. Tying in parenting and helping our children, we put the oxygen mask on first, right? So it's about regulating ourselves, our bodies, and our minds first. Otherwise, what that looks like. And any high achieving woman will resonate with this who's a parent. You're easily triggered. You feel like you're bracing all the time. So even all the littlest noise can set you off or startle you, right? Because you're in that high alert state, and you don't even notice it. So, kids just need calm. They need to know that their environment is safe. And when mom and dad, or mom and mom and dad, if there's like that environment of high stress and dysregulation, the children pick up on it. And what their nervous system reads is it's not safe here. So that just creates, fear and frustration and anger and, all the things in them because they don't have language capacity to express themselves. They don't really know what's happening inside their body. Just physiologically, it starts to come out in ways that are undesirable for the family. So I really believe there's such simplicity in helping a parent or helping anyone see their blueprint. And then you naturally soften because you can see in black and white what's been happening your whole life and you've never been able to put words to it, you know? So you
Mm-hmm.
experienced that same thing recently, and you also are experiencing it now in your business, where I
Yep.
did too. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally, working against my natural design and my natural rhythm and how I show up in the world and how I'm universally designed to run a business. And everything changes when you shift and when you just embody that version of yourself. And then that translates to your children, right? They start to feel safe in the home. And there's a very simple um, it comes from NLP, neuro linguistic programming, but it's a very simple concept of reach and respond. And all of us as human beings have experienced the us reaching out and not getting a response, right? Mom was either too
Mm-hmm.
busy, mom was on the phone, I had to cry it out in my crib, whatever that is. We as infants and children have all reached out for some connection, and it was not met at some point. Not all the time, I'm saying, but um, when a child reaches for your hand or they need that eye contact, and you're on your phone and they have to tell you something, it's so important for them neurologically to meet that need. It's so important. It tells their nervous system that they matter, that they're safe, that they're important, that their needs, it's okay to have their needs met. It's really powerful. It's really powerful. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that, make sure that I got that piece in because I always tell my kids now they're 17 and 22. I say, if you ever reach for me and I don't reach back, please bring it to my attention because I want to make sure that I'm always giving you that, meeting that need for you in the moment.
Mm-hmm. You brought up such great points, and I'll try to remember everything. But some things that really stood out to me with all of that is stop trying to fit your like round peg of a self into a square hole. In both like your life and your business, and also projecting that onto your children too. I mean, we know that the school systems, the way that they are, and we're not going to into that too much, but just to touch on that is like we know that that actually is only designed for a very, very, very narrow description of a kid, of a student. It doesn't apply to everybody. And that's why like a lot of students, the system fails the students, not the other way around. Because again, like you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole and like trying to shove it in there, like whatever it takes, like with a mallet,
Yeah.
like come on, fit in there. And it's just, it creates tension and it doesn't serve anybody. And the same thing with our businesses. And I too, like when I was working with a coach and they pulled up my human design, which was relatively new to me. And a lot of the women listening, a lot of the women that I work with are like intuitive. Like, am I a bit woo? Yes. And yet, like, this isn't necessarily that way. Like, I wouldn't even call this human design stuff like woo to begin with. But
Mhm.
if you're curious about it, like, just stay curious if you want to explore it. But what it did also was like give me that permission to oh, like I don't have to necessarily do all the things that they, whoever they are, say to do in business or in life because that's just not who I am. And it wasn't necessarily telling me anything I didn't already know, but it was very reaffirming for that. And then I literally felt my body just like you said, it's just this like exhale that you get to have, and you go, oh, I don't have to do that because it's pushing a rock up a hill. Like I don't need to be Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill only to have it roll down because I'm trying to do something that isn't aligned with who I am and how I want to show up in the world or in my business or even in, my personal life. So many good points there. And there was one other that see if my brain comes back to it. But anything else you want to say about that before we move on?
Yes, and I was listening to everything that you were saying. It's it's so interesting how we just recently met and you and I have the, very same foundational understanding of I don't even know how to put it into words. What I do want to say is my my motivation, started a couple years ago to pivot to helping families and kids based on what was happening in our own house. And I looked out and saw the landscape and I didn't like it, you know? Um, and I thought there has to be a better way. When I started in this space, and I can talk about this now, but I felt myself um, with resistant energy because I wanted to fight the school system. I wanted to fight the doctors. I wanted to fight the conscious illusions, all of it, like the labels and the diagnosis and the medication. And it was like, wow, it's a lot of energy. And so when I got really in touch with my own design and aligned with how I want to show up in the world, it shifted so much for me out of that space. Because when we stay resistant to something, we're wrapping our energy, we're staying entwined with it. And that's not what I wanted. What I want is to create something new that gives parents, humans, children a new space to walk into that is different and that just works, you know? So that's all I wanted to say. Yeah, that was a huge shift for me. So when we're talking about aligning with our own design and aligning our business with, you have to recognize, are you fighting something or are you creating something new? And it doesn't necessarily have to be about products and services, but where are you bucking the current in your life? And that could be, at home with your kids. Like if they're triggering you, it's because you feel like you might be failing and you're afraid for them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely. And
there are alternatives to all of this. And no, I'm not anti-doctor, anti-diagnosis, or anti-medication at all. It's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is when you can get back to that place where you trust yourself and your intuition as a woman, as a business owner, and as a parent, you shift so much in your energy. You open yourself up to receive so many beautiful things. And that's really what I want to get at with parents is get back to your own intuition about what's right for your child. And you don't have to listen to other people tell you what is. There are deeper questions, And I'll just say, like the thing that I did a TEDx style talk last year, and the thing that motivated me finally, I think, just to finally speak up and have a bigger voice in this space was taking our 15-year-old son to the pediatrician and just average annual physical. And I stepped out for a minute so they could have their standard private chat as they do with teenagers. And I came back in, and the first thing she said to me when I sat back down was, "Your son needs to program the suicide prevention hotline number into his phone." Right? Your eyes, like the shock that I
wow.
felt in my system because I know my child and I've been in the space where I had debilitating anxiety and where I just wanted everything to stop. And I was helpless and hopeless. That was not my child. And he looked at me and he said, she goes, he has stress about school. He said, I stress about school because I don't like getting up at 5:30 in the morning. I'm not going to kill myself. it was the bigger alarm bell for me that she so flippantly said that, made that comment and gave that directive to a mom who actually have tools, information, wisdom, knowledge that other parents might not have and might be sitting there wondering and worrying about their child, like, did she see something I don't? She's a
Mm-hmm.
doctor. She should know, right? Um, and it dawned on me that she didn't know what's causing stress in children today. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, yeah, this is not a good path to be on. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not the right thing to be saying in front of a 15-year-old child. And that's not a good productive thing to say to a mom when you don't ask any questions, So I'm saying when we're creating something new, we're talking about how do you learn? And you can see all this in the human design profile, so we don't necessarily have to ask the child, right? But a parent can observe their child and see how do they play? What do they play with? What do they like? What are they drawn to? Where do they struggle in school? Are there certain, concepts that they just don't grasp? So our daughter, math, not her thing. So she sees in visual like images and pictures, and she's very creative. Our son is very analytical, sports data all day long. Can't wait to go to college next or this fall. And so when you look at the differences in them, um, and I've asked them individually, well, what do you think would happen if I put you in a cubicle for 8 hours a day and asked you to do the things that your sibling likes? And they both were like horrified at the thought. As a teenager, they're like, oh my God. I said, Jason, what if you had to sit in a cubicle and read books and paint and, write just all the things that she likes? And he was like, oh my God. He was bored, miserable, like, and she couldn't imagine anything worse, sitting in a cubicle analyzing, data all day, which is what I was doing, analyzing things, right? So anyway, it's just really interesting when we can give our children the permission to be who they came here to be. That is where safety lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll touch
Absolutely.
on real quick. There was a time a couple years ago when I realized all of this, that I was parenting from a place of trying to mold my children into good, productive, having good grades, what are all the things, right? People in society. And I realized they're different people. Like, why am I using this cookie cutter parenting style with them when they need different things? And I remember the moment I stood in front of my daughter and I said, I have to apologize for trying to mold you into the person I thought you should be instead of allowing you to be the person you came here to be.
Mm.
It was such a powerful moment because she didn't really know what I was talking about, but I saw her shoulders drop and I saw her face soften. So there was something inside that went, oh, it's safe to be me.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me, it really gets me emotional because I just want parents to know it is that simple. We're trying, a lot of us, the strategies out there are all about behavior modification. It's not about behavior modification. It's not about forcing them to get good grades. It's about letting them move forward in their life in a way that feels right and safe for them. You get
Yeah.
resilience, you get high self-esteem, you get confidence, these are all natural things,
Yeah.
good about themselves. So, yeah.
For sure. And it really is this like, shared that, very vulnerable story with your son. Thank you for sharing that because I would imagine that some of our listeners may have had that a similar experience or they might in the future. Hopefully not. That's what we're trying to prevent. But, mental health of our youth is super important and is, very top of mind these days as it should be. And really it's about this being aware of this positive feedback loop meaning like the stress that you have in yourself gets projected on and felt by your children, then the stress that they have gets projected back onto you, and it amplifies, right? So every time this cycle keeps this back and forth happens, it amplifies. So that's a positive feedback loop. So it's being aware of those things because, yeah, like you said, it starts with ourselves and all of that. Because if we want to help our children, you have to be grounded and calm in your own self. Otherwise, you're coming from that place that is running you as opposed to you running your brain, right? It can take control, as I will know. And, talk about women like trying to do it all. You talked about that a bit before, and this fear of this kind of been ingrained into us of that our productivity is our worth. And so we tend to try to hold everything together, even when things at home may be falling apart, or maybe our businesses are struggling and we're trying to put on a face and everything is great. And I know in the past, in my own life, as I was really struggling with my health toward the tail end of my career as a body worker, in my first business, I mean, I really tried to hold it together and appear, quote, fine for my clients, even though I was really not fine on the inside at all. So a lot of women I work with are also high performers, and they look fine, they get it done, but they're braced all the time. And what are some of the most common signs that you see when someone is living in survival mode but is still, quote, functioning?
So I think it's important to understand survival mode in itself, and what does that mean, right? Um, and depending on how our nervous system perceives the environment, will kind of determine what direction we go in survival mode. So for me, on the outside, no one had any idea what was going on unless they were, close to me. Um, had no idea what was going on inside, internally, and I was miserable. I was, yeah, in pain, like horrible pain all the time. I couldn't sleep. I had nothing to give my family. But on the outside, it was like, hey, as long as you have 401k and dental, you're good, right? Because you're following the path that everybody says you need to and climb the corporate ladder and blah, blah, blah. And it just, so when we think about survival mode, I think for women, we process stress and anxiety differently. So we're probably more likely to go into the freeze and fawn response than, boys and men will go into the fight or flight response. So it might look like in a classroom, a young boy being hyperactive or not being able to focus, right? And so that's a problem for the teacher. So the teacher then suggests to the parent that they get the child evaluated, and then potentially there's diagnosis and potentially medication. But girls, on the other hand, will more often go into that fly below the radar scenario. So that's what I see mostly in women who look like they have it all together, right? But really underneath, they're screaming inside. But it doesn't show up that way because they've just learned. Their nervous system has learned this is how you adapt. This is how you belong. And anything else is not acceptable. So does that answer your question? I think that,
It does. Yeah. And I think a
yeah,
lot of
a lot of
people
us
may
are in
not be
that
a,
freezer fawn.
I think a lot of people don't know or fully understand that like freeze and fawn, like I didn't mention fawn, so I'm glad you brought that up, but that freeze is a total survival response.
Hmm.
And, people know fight or flight, but freeze, and especially the fawn, like that tend to, yeah, I would say that that is more characteristic of women. And like we put on a face, but really it's like when you find yourself screaming on the inside or like wanting to scream, that's a really good indication that maybe there's something worth addressing there and investigating more.
Yeah. I mean,
So now let's,
for
oh, go
example, like
ahead.
with our daughter going into school, like there were signs very early on that she wasn't developmentally ready. I won't get into the entire story, but um, she ended up going into that freeze and fawn. She was just like, your brain just kind of gives up. And you're like, nothing I do is going to matter. So I just have to get through the day. I just have to get through this exercise. I have to get through this year and move on to the next, next year in school. And so there were no signs. Everything looked fine on the outside until she got towards the end of high school and she just couldn't wait to get out of school. She hated it. But again, like she didn't have the language, the capacity for language to really express until she got out of school. And she was like, it's the grades, the expectations, the deadlines, and if we had known what her design was, we could have helped her teachers better support how she learns. So instead of regurgitating content from a book in a written book report, she could have put together a PowerPoint presentation. She could have drawn a storybook, with pictures to show that she understood the hero's journey and the lesson of the story or whatever, right? It's just completely different ways. And unfortunately, by the time she got out of college or school, high school, she didn't want to have anything to do with college. And she tried some online classes. She got ASL certification, same exact problem she was running up against that reminded her why she hated high school. And it's just unfortunate, that now it's been about getting her out of survival mode because it's where she grew up. Her nervous system, her whole life was in survival mode, and we had no idea because she was quiet.
Mm.
She wasn't one of the loud ones. So now, because she was in that state of paralysis of not being able to move forward, we realized there was something else going on there. And then the human design really helped us unlock. And then again, when we shared with her what we could see about her and what she read about who she was, and she was just like, oh, yes, she felt validated. Right? She felt validated, like, oh yeah, that's me. And she feels safe now because she knows that we support her in all of her glory and her beautifulness. And but still doesn't change the fact that she has this nervous system that is afraid of failure and afraid of disappointing us and afraid of putting herself out there. So we're still working on that, but she's in such a better place than she was a couple years ago.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And ladies, for those of you listening, like if as a high functioning, successful woman entrepreneur, maybe a parent as well, and you still find yourself afraid of failure or maybe being seen or, other fears that you have that are paralyzing you, like those are things to dive into too. And again, like human design can help you, but then also be really aware of how that affects your kids. Because when you address those fears and you uncover them and you shift things, then again, that gives permission to your kids and allows you to see them for who they are. Like Linda's daughter, but she felt seen, and feeling seen is so important. Feeling seen and heard
Hmm.
for who we are, that creates safety. Um, so recognize those things in yourself because fear is paralyzing. I have some great examples of having worked with bodywork clients where like literally like their body would freeze in times where they were fearful. So yeah, I'm not the most articulate in the moment, but I've seen it in real life, so it's a real thing.
Yeah, me too.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and Linda, let's make this really real for those who are listening or watching. Would you give us an example of what to say or do in the moment with this example? The kid is dysregulated, the parent is triggered, things are escalating. What does creating safety sound and look like right then and there?
It's easier said than done, right? Because I can say the most important thing we have to do in that moment is pause. And it's so easy to get triggered in that moment, right? And so we have to just pause. The most important thing is to communicate that calm in the moment. And when we do, it has that natural tendency of de-escalating things because now the child is not on high alert in defense mode, waiting for the parent to pounce on them. It's really important to understand where that child is coming from that emotionally dysregulated state. It has nothing to do with us. It's not personal. It's them feeling dysregulated and unsafe in the bottom line, right? At the end of the day, and and trying to manage the emotions that come with that. So their outburst, their was going to say accusation, but that's not the right word. Attack, if they're attacking you for something, right? It's not personal. They're just their brain is grasping for words. And so it's really important that we regulate ourselves in the moment and take that breath and pause. If your child is shorter than you, get down to their eye level so they don't feel so intimidated by you being over them. That is actually one of the most important things we can do with our kids, is speak to them at eye level. It makes them feel equal, more equal. So, yeah, there's just, when we would come together at the end of the day, be like me, my husband's over there, and my son's in the kitchen, and daughter comes in, and how's your day? And she goes off, you know, and then I'm triggered because I'm like, what is your problem? I just asked you a simple question. And so now we're in the mix of it. We're in the height of it. And my husband's over there rolling his eyes. Oh, here we go again. And our son is like, why is everybody always so angry? And this was constant. This was like our constant life. And I'm sure other parents can relate to that, right? It's like you come together and it's like someone threw a cherry bomb in the middle of the kitchen floor, and all of a sudden it's off to the races. And she would storm upstairs and slam their door, and we wouldn't see her again until dinner. Um, and what I realized, what we learned through this process of regulation, and that comes through learning human design, learning our children's human design, seeing them, supporting them, hearing them, understanding them. Now they feel seen, they feel validated, they feel heard, and they trust you again. And when you have a headache and you take some ibuprofen or Tylenol, and you don't notice the moment the headache goes away. It's just like later you're like, oh, I don't have a headache anymore. That's good, right? That's what happened with us. We didn't set out to alleviate that scenario of the cherry bomb in the kitchen. It just had a natural tendency, and that's what happened. And it was just like all of a sudden I was realizing we're having these beautiful conversations, which means conversations. There's just like this open and the trust and the flow, and like we weren't angry with each other anymore. Like that anger was just gone. It was really incredible. It was really incredible. And that's really one of the things I want to help parents understand, that there's simplicity in this. And giving your child, meeting their needs is all they want, all they need. And when you can learn to do that based on who they are, everything else shifts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so, when listeners, you find yourself in those moments like Linda described, of like, you ask how their day was and things escalate from there, that's your opportunity to be aware, like step back a little bit, like mentally, like step back, take that breath, ground yourself, like feel your feet, feel your body, be aware of your surroundings, and just like take a breath before you speak. That breath is really, really important. I teach this even to my yoga students, that this is such an important practice, is like breathe, because that breath gives you that moment of pause so that you can actually think and respond as opposed to react. It's that
Mhm.
reactivity that's causing so much of the tension. But when you take that breath, it puts you in that capacity to respond. And you can do that from a calm place rather than a reactive one. And touched on this in another interview recently. Like, our society is extremely reactive right now. So, do we really want to be bringing that reactivity even more into our homes when it's already all over social media? We can feel it in the air, essentially. It's like, no, we need people to be more responsive as opposed to reactive. And there's a very,
Mhm.
very clear difference between the two. So I'm glad that you brought that example in, because that's really, really tangible for people listening.
Yeah, and it's important to understand why society is in such a reactive state. There's a lot of reasons how we got here.
Yeah.
But we can choose something different for ourselves. We can choose not to align with that energy. We can choose not to tune in to what is being um, shared, content, news, whatever that means,
Yeah.
right? And I do want to offer, there is a practice that you can do with your child when you're not in that triggered state. So something that I learned from Dr. David Kruger was about belief. when you believe in another person, when you tell another person that you believe in them, it changes their physiology. And we've talked about neuroplasticity. We didn't do that here, but it starts to change the wiring in their brain and it changes who they are and how they see themselves. So, he said, when you tell another person that you believe in them, they will show you why you do. And it's really powerful. So every night I started doing that when our son was, I don't know, he was like 14, 15. And so he's taller than me and would come and I didn't kiss him goodnight in bed, but he would come give me a hug and a kiss goodnight before he went upstairs. And I started saying, I love you, I believe in you, and I'm proud of you. And at first he would look at me funny. And after, a few days, a week, I don't know what went by, he said, Mom, why do you always say that? And I said, it's just important for me to let you know that I love you, I'm proud of you, and I believe in you. So however, you want to say it, but I added the proud of you because I wanted him to know, I love you, I really believe in you, and I'm so proud of who you are. So anyway, when a child goes to bed, it's seeping into their subconscious when they're falling asleep, that last thing that they heard you say, and it changes them. And after months go by, right, and he comes to me and gives me my hug and kiss goodnight. And I guess I was on my phone or something because I was distracted at the time. And he stood there and he said, Mom, I'm like, what? You didn't say the words. So it touched me so much because it made me realize that he was really paying attention and he really enjoyed hearing it. No matter how old they are, tell them that you love them, you believe in them, and you're proud of them, and it will change them and it will change your relationship. And I
Mm,
share that actually with prospects when I have discovery calls or with my clients. I say that's one of the easiest things you can start to do tonight. And they always come back a week later and say how impactful it has been. They can see the
mm.
difference in their child and in their relationship. It's really, really beautiful. So I offer that as
Wow,
my
that
free
is
gift
powerful.
today.
That is powerful. And I would also add, like for you ladies listening, what even greater impact could that have if you look in the mirror every single day, whether it's when you first get up or before you go to bed, and you tell yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, and you go, I love you, I'm proud of you. And what's the most important one
I
there?
believe in you.
I believe in you. Yes.
I
So, what if
love
you tell
that.
yourself that?
Yeah.
I love you. I am proud of you. I believe in you. Whatever order you want to do that in, doesn't matter. But those three things, how would that change for you to say that A to yourself so that you begin to believe it? Because if you don't believe it, again, like there's that disconnect, right? Linda talks about
Mhm.
alignment. There's a disconnect if you don't believe that for yourself. And so you need to believe that for yourself in order to also then really prove to your kids that they can also believe that about themselves. So that would be my additional little challenge of like, try that with your children and let us know, like comment in the video, let us know what impact that has. And also try it for yourself and let us know what impact that has for you as well as your family.
Love that.
Yeah. So Linda, just the last few questions for us for today. If you could leave one message for the woman who's trying to be a regulated parent and also the engine of her business, what do you want her to remember on the days when she feels like she's failing at both?
You're never getting it wrong. You can't get it wrong. You know, I believe that our journey, our path, our entanglement with each other, these relationships are intentional. They're here to show us strengths and weaknesses we might have in ourselves, right? They're mirrors to who we are. Um, I would say embrace all the things as gifts and try to find what is this showing me? Ask that question, what is this showing me? Um, how can I better support myself so that I can support the ones I love? And there's a there's a quote from somebody, a coach that I followed years ago, and he said, being lazy is the most vibrationally productive thing you can do. Dissect it. Think about it. Right? When do you have the most amazing ideas? In the tub, in the petty chair, in the shower, when you're cooking dinner and listening to a beautiful song, when you take a walk, like these are the times when your body is calm, your brain is open to receive. So the messages are always there and they're always available to every one of us. But if you're like this all the time, you're never going to hear any of it. So I think it's so important. I probably take more time for myself than the average person who promotes self-care. Just in reading and contemplation, and I tune into what do I want to do now that feels good. And sometimes you do just need to hang up everything and just stop. Like when I lost my job, I started looking for another job and it felt horrible. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna shut it all off. I'm just gonna stop. And my husband was like reading on the porch and listening to birds and taking walks and listening to Abraham Hicks. It was like, what are you doing? I don't know. I just know I can't do that. Right. And it was the most productive time of my life, those few months where I just got out of my head and I found calm and I did things that brought me peace. And it led me here. Lily pad by lily pad by lily pad. Stay curious, stay open, stay available. Find out who you are and what makes you tick and align with that. Embody that. You will be amazed at what shows up for you.
Mm.
Mm.
Figure out
Because where you
who
stop
you
fighting the
are.
river, or you stop fighting the
Mm-hmm.
current, and you realize the river starts to carry you.
Mm. Right? And if you don't have to fight against the current, then you're less likely to burn out, right? It takes so much energy to try to do everything, right? And we're in this society of doing, and it's okay to take those moments, whether it's a minute, whether it's 5 hours, to just be. And being is productive. Uh, like as a yoga instructor as well, like a lot of people don't want to lie in shavasana, this final relaxation pose, this resting pose. And yet, like, we'll say this is the most important pose in an asana practice, in a physical practice, because that's where integration happens, right? It's that stillness to then,
Mhm.
it is that ultimate surrender, but it's also that stillness where we receive everything that we've just done up until that point. And I wrote a blog post way back in my first business called The Disease of Busyness. And, we think that being busy, trust me, I've been so guilty of this myself of like, I need to be doing something, especially when I was disabled and, on the couch for years in my sweats because I couldn't physically do anything else with chronic fatigue syndrome and other things. And I felt like I had to make up for it because I wasn't productive. I wasn't able to work. I had to, close my business and go on disability. And I felt like I had to do everything around the house as much as I could. I mean, that was very limited, but I felt like I had to make up for it because I wasn't doing. But you know what? Like me lying on the couch was doing because that's what I could do. And it really humbled me about understanding my value and my worth was not tied to my productivity. It was a really big eye opener because, like you mentioned way at the beginning of our conversation, that's what it was tied to.
Mhm.
And to have that taken away really made me rethink about who was I and how am I showing up and what is my purpose in the world, even if I can't be productive in the way that society sees it. How else can I add value to the world? And I found other ways. So, yeah, giving yourself the permission to be.
Mm. That's perfect. And one of the things you and I both, our intention is breaking cycles and understanding where these patterns comes from empowers women. There's nothing wrong with you. You just learned from I don't want to say bad. You learned from modeling. We are not that far removed from women whose worth was tied to productivity, was tied to beauty, was tied to well-behaved children, was tied to maintaining a home, right? So our survival as women depended heavily on being married, of having a husband who would take care of you, right? We couldn't get loans, we couldn't get credit cards, couldn't get jobs. If you wanted to work, you could be a secretary or a nurse or a teacher, right? It's pretty much your
Hmm.
options.
Yep.
And so if we think about what our mothers experienced growing up and the modeling they experienced and the fear that was in their mothers. They might not have talked about it, but again, it's energy and it's being absorbed by the children, right? And it's passed down. So we can give ourselves grace and compassion and understanding where this patterning and the conditioning and the imprints are coming from, and then tie it back to neuroplasticity and say, you know what? We have the potential and the ability to change who we are, and we can break the cycles, and you can break the cycles of parenting. So if you're cookie cutter parenting like your parents parented, you can change that too and be more aligned with, what your children need. And at the end of my talk that I mentioned last year, my stage talk, I said, this is one of the big light bulb moments for me. When we free our kids, we free ourselves too. And it chokes me up because it was just like this intuitive thing that came to me, because that's what happened. Like we gave them the freedom and the safety to be who they came here to be. And it naturally changed everything in our home. And I was free, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So just all of this ties together, whether it's in your business or in your home with your relationship with your business, your relationship with your kids, right? And it's
Absolutely.
all ties back together. So yeah, I love what you do in helping women recognize that they do have the power to change their lives by
I
changing
love
what's
it.
up here.
Absolutely. And we absolutely have the power to change who we are through neuroplasticity. And I know Linda and I, we could record a whole other conversation talking about neuroplasticity. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, drop us a note in the comments, because we could totally geek out on that. And it is like my jam. It has been my exploration every single day since the very beginning of 2025, and something I still practice every single day. So that's why I am here and doing what I do. And I know Linda and I both know how powerful neuroplasticity is in the ability to change one's life. So yeah, we could stay on talk for hours about that, but we are coming to our close for today. And a couple questions, Linda, that I ask every guest. What is one practice or mindset that helps you stay grounded when life feels uncertain or overwhelming?
Oh, I just completely put it all over there and I go over there. It's very easy. And now I've gotten really good at it. I recognize when I'm in that state of overwhelm because everything feels icky and hard. And I close my laptop, I leave the room, whatever, and I just go close my eyes, I listen to some music or the waves crashing, and I have a reset. It's amazing how you can shift yourself out of that. We have a tendency to want to feel like we have to control everything and be responsible for everything. And really, then we start to think that everything is emergency and it's not. So then you can start to say, what can I back burner? What do I need to do right now? And there was a thing in a business coaching, ABC, categorize things in ABC. This will be good for your entrepreneurs, especially. So A stands for air. What do I absolutely have to do right now, right? How long can you live without air? Not very long. So what do I do? What do I need to address now? B is for bread. So how long can I live without food? So that would be something that, okay, well, I don't need to do that today, but I do need to do it this week, or in the next few weeks. And then C stands for chocolate. What's a nice to have? This would be nice to have, but do I need it for my survival right now? No. Is it an emergency? No. So you can kind of either, table that for next year, or just eliminate it altogether, sub it out to somebody.
I love those things. A, like disconnect and reset, and then also those ABCs, which I actually hadn't heard those ABCs. So I so appreciate you bringing that up. And I
Yeah.
would actually say for me, in my family, chocolate is an essential food group. So honestly, like I don't know, that's not just a nice to have. That's an essential thing. So
And
that's
that's fine.
debatable,
Everybody
but
has different classifications, right?
That's debatable in my opinion, but I get the point, and it's really, really valuable, those ABCs. So
Nice.
that is fantastic. And as we wrap up, what is your biggest takeaway from our conversation today?
My biggest takeaway, that we're just always learning. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the universe for connecting us. I appreciate the conversations that we've had. And I just, I stay open and curious, and I just always love learning from other people. So that's my takeaway from today is gratitude for you and this space, and that I just love to keep learning.
Thank you. There's so many things. It's hard for me to pick as I'm racking my brain of like, what is the one takeaway? I think one of the biggest takeaway, the take home message from this conversation is to really align yourself with who you are and align, your business, every aspect of your life, align it with who you are and help your children do the same so that they can then show up authentically as who they are and they can succeed in the way that makes sense to their being. And so it's really staying in alignment in ourselves and also allowing our children to do that as well. So I would say that's one of my takeaways. There are so many, but that would be one if I had to pick it. So, well, Linda, thank you so much for being here today, sharing your wisdom with us, and I so appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
Great. So I'm going to take Linda out here as we go to close. And if you'd like to connect with Linda or follow her, just check the description and you will find any links that you can reach out to her with questions, and be sure to connect with her as well, especially if you have questions about how she might be able to help you and your kids and your family. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. If something resonated or opened up for you today, subscribe so you can stay connected for future conversations that support your energy, your capacity, and your leadership. I'll see you in the next episode.